Good morning, everybody. My name's Emma, and I'd like to welcome you to today's session, How to Execute on Systems Controls Across the Organization. As you may well know or not know, this is part 3 of 4 sessions we put together for Oracle GRC customers, now that support for GRC software is very limited. If you did miss those first 2 parts, then you can find those on our website underneath the webinar resource tab. So today I'd like to introduce you to Scott Elequin, who has worked with many Oracle customers over the years, and Adil Khan, who is an expert in the GRC space, CEO at SafePaaS, and who has co-authored the GRC handbook for Oracle applications. So today, Scott is going to be playing the role of IT Applications Director. Scott is going to be talking about the challenges he is facing in terms of building a GRC roadmap for his organization, and Adil, being the expert, will guide him through how he can effectively address those challenges. So Scott, over to you.
Super. All right, guys, so I am typecast today. I'm playing the guy who doesn't know the answers. Adil, you are the expert, so if I get a bad plan out of this, it's completely on you. There's no pressure whatsoever. So let me tell you kind of about my situation. So I'm an application director. I'm married. I have 3 kids and 2 dogs. I personally have been doing Oracle applications since 11.5.10.2. And you know what? I like it. I'm really good at it. I speak the language. I know the people. And I really like my job. But honestly, I'm really stressed out. There's a bunch of stuff going on. And we're going to go through a little bit of a case study so you know what my team is going through right now, and try to put together a plan as to exactly what we can do to figure out, handle our SOX requirements, at least in 2021. So I'm with Safe Enterprise Corporation. Now that's a very catchy name, $650 million in revenue, and we do computer networking components. So that started off with traditional manufacturing of computer hardware, software, network, router kind of stuff. We've moved more into some med device, as well as some wearables. So there's some really new requirements from a manufacturing perspective, but also from an audit perspective. We do business in 12 countries, and our current version of EBS is 12.2.5. It's working pretty well for us. It's worked pretty well for a long time. We run pretty much the entire suite from the ERP side, financials, order management, manufacturing, supply chain. We do a little bit of service, but not much. And we implemented GRC in 2012. And the objective there was, from a Sarbanes-Oxley perspective, from an audit perspective, from a governance perspective, we felt like if we had a tool that would allow us to check the box, we wouldn't have to worry about it. And as much as there are pros and cons around the tool, we've been fairly successful in doing that up until this point. We do run Workday for HR payroll, and we run Magento for e-commerce, and that has a web service that connects directly into order management for provisioning, for demand reservation, for pricing, things like that. So the situation that brought us here today and brought me to Adil to kind of see what he feels about this is, you know, as you guys know, Oracle's placed some limitations on how they're supporting GRC products. And honestly, now that I know what they're doing and not doing, I really want to figure out how to put together a plan to meet auditor SOX requirements for 2021. So, not to say that that's not, you know, a challenge, but we do have other things going on in the business as well. The first thing is that we had already moved heavily into e-commerce. We're seeing a lot more customer intimacy, but at the same time, we're doing more with VARs and channels through distribution. So what we're seeing is a separation in terms of how we're managing customers and how the transactions, even if it's the same transaction, could be originating in 2 completely different places where there's, you know, different business processes on all sides. We do, as everyone has a lot of issues with GDPR. We've got a SOC 2 issue now, HIPAA. There's some FEA things that could be coming. And then again, the Workday implementation went well, but that was mid last year. So we're still got some business processes that are locking in around that. Now, I think the blessing in all of this is that COVID has not affected us as much as it has some people, because the nature of our business, the disconnected workforce, has actually created some demand for our products, but it's changed the products that we sell and the way we sell them. So now 80% of our employees work remotely, up from 15%. What we're producing is actually different. And even though we haven't had any major layoffs, there's been a lot of employee churn in terms of contingent workers. We did a furlough and then we brought people on. So there's been a lot of transactions up and down across the board. And so to me, what we've seen is that our business just got really complicated in the last year. And then this thing happened where now we're supposed to have an audit piece that really overlays it to make sure that the SOX requirements are met. And so to me, I guess I'll ask Adil this question if there's anything else you want to know about our business. But honestly, if you could just help me figure out like how to check the box for 2021, I will absolutely get to a gold star. I'll stick it right here on the screen. If you can find a way that we could check the box but not have to go throw it all away next year when we go back to do what we really plan to do, well then I give you 2 gold stars and I'll buy you dinner next time I see you. So that's kind of the challenge. And I guess the only other thing I'll throw into the mix is that my CFO came into my office last week and she said, guess what, Scott? We really need to have a plan in place by the end of the year. So you need to go figure stuff out. You need to decide what you're going to do. You don't have to have it done, but I need to see something that will satisfy the auditors that also won't derail the business. So it's a big, those are big shoes to fill. If we want to end the call right now, I totally understand. If you feel like you want to jump into it, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Scott. So thanks for giving me a really good background, and thanks for considering me to help you guide through this process. A number of our customers are in the same boat as you are, where they've kind of relied on GRC for a few years to pass their SOX audits. Their auditors have gotten comfortable with it, and then now where it's limited support and limited capabilities. Maybe I don't know how many people in your organization are using the product today. But what we find is that, a number of our customers in similar situation had a turnover. You mentioned turnover here, so that reminds me of some other situations where I've run into. And the turnover, what that does is that, as part of turnover, there's not a lot of training and knowledge transfers. The folks that understood the controls back in 2012 aren't the same people that are running the reports today. And sometimes the reports are not clear to the auditors. So it's a common challenge that we see with organizations like yourself. One of the things that you said, I wish I could get that gold star, but I'm going to fail that test today because I am not your auditor. Ultimately, your external auditors are the ones that are going to confirm if that box can be checked, right? That's the whole idea of having independence, and that's the fundamental principle behind Sarbanes-Oxley that came into law back in 2002. But I'll help you, give you the tools and roadmap in this session to help you get to the point where you can go to your auditors and be confident that next year, as you take on this new initiative and your CFO meets the requirements, that you'll be able to get that box checked. So tell me a little bit about maybe who uses GRC in your organization today, how well it's adopted before we jump into the next step.
If I were to give you a general principle, it's what is the minimum that we need to do so that we can survive the audit. I think there's some ways we could use controls throughout the organization. We're not there yet. So it's really more of a financial tool around compliance and nothing really beyond that at this point.
So it's been kind of in the state it was implemented back in 2012 with a limited number of users generating reports, and that's common for many of the customers. Some technology barriers that you've talked about, some upgrades and so forth. But this is an example of who really cares about controls in the organization. So I wanted to just kind of start by helping kind of talk through who is impacted by controls. And this is by no means an exhaustive list for a specific customer like yourself, but it's generally what I hear from our customers. So you can see I've got all the major silos of a typical organization that gets impacted by GRC. So I think it's a good starting point for you to start that the journey on building out a roadmap by collecting the information from the folks that are impacted with GRC, right? So the executives, you mentioned your CFO wants to be able to check the box, as you said, but there's also other concerns that you may want to talk to her again and see what else is causing the pain point in your organization. You mentioned you're switching products, more people are working remotely. So not only has your process changed, but clearly the risk in the business has changed.
Yeah.
And that generally is a big part of what executives care about.
And you bring up a really good point there, Adil, because if you look at our CSO, CISO, and the security side, they're worried about intrusion, identity, but they're not really thinking about access. And I know that as soon as they think about it, they're going to say, so who really has access? So we're looking at security from almost like the mindset that people are in the office still on the application side. And I predict that that's going to become more of an externally facing requirement going forward.
Absolutely. So back in 2012, when you were looking at your requirements, obviously it's clear that those requirements have shifted to things that have impacted your business today, and not just your business, but it's the environment we're in, right? We have more cyber attacks. We have better technology to protect ourselves against data theft and other trade secret losses. So those are the things that I would say that executives care about. Certainly they care about the bottom line. They get rated on the bottom line. So, it's while we're talking today, focusing on helping you stay compliant, and we'll stay on that track. But do remember that, at no additional cost, you could also get additional benefits, because GRC can also help you stop the waste and other types of bottlenecks in your businesses. So you mentioned you're switching products. Those products are probably impacting your supply chain. So that supply chain needs to make sure the new suppliers that are onboarded are trustworthy and quality, and that you can meet the customer commitments that your sales folks are making in the organization working remotely, right? So reducing waste and reducing those bottlenecks in the process is a big part of what our executives come to us and care about. And what we offer to them is the ability to embed some of these controls in these key processes, so that instead of you just checking the box at the end of the quarter or end of the year, you can continuously be looking at what the risk is coming up, and the executives can make better decisions because they're more informed. So that's the executive side. I won't have time to obviously go through each of these silos, but let's hit internal audit, because I know that your internal audit organization is very interested in and very concerned about having a system they can rely on, so their external auditors can depend on the good work they do. And so one of the things that they might be concerned about is, what controls to select in this new world, right? And I know that you put this stuff in back in 2012. I don't know if you've updated the controls since you implemented GRC. What's your current status?
Yeah, only if we were required to. We didn't try to figure out new things we could control. We did things we were asked to do.
Right. So in 2013, COSO 13 comes out. Many organizations, including from what I understand from your organization, went through a rationalization process of overall business controls. And that was a benefit, right? Because the less controls you had to test, more key controls you had to test, the less cost you had to comply. However, those controls have, with the acquisitions you've made, with the new rollouts of Oracle, those controls have shifted, right? So one of the first things that we'll talk about in the roadmap is, what is your current situation? What controls you need? Now, I live in this controls world. Some people say control freak, but I have a catalog of 1,000+ controls that your auditors can pick from, and that reduces 5 man-years of your effort, right? Because now you can go to our catalog, pick out the controls that many of the other customers like yourselves, Oracle customer, are using out there. So it makes your life a little bit easier, and auditors like to focus on effective controls and good control design. And if you can help reduce their budget and cost, they would love you for that, right? So there's some gold stars for you guys. You're the guy that really worries about making sure the lights on and the business is running in your ERP system. However, I understand that budgets are getting tighter, and I'm hearing from customers that IT is one of the areas where we're having to tighten our belt, even though we need more IT right now, because 80% of your workforce is working remotely. So what are some of the things that you could benefit, Scott, from the controls environment? Where do you think we can add value to your processes?
I mean, there's several. I mean, I've got transactions that flow between systems that have no management oversight at all. It would have to be manual.
Right.
And then, frankly, it's in supply chain, it's in receiving, it's in shipping, it's in auditing. Do people change orders after they've been booked? It's looking at receiving and the price variance. I mean, there's a lot of things that ERPs don't naturally do that can improve efficiency. But I mean, to me, kind of back to this plan, and I've got my CFO kind of, I can feel her presence in this room. Since she doesn't exist, I'm assuming she's not on this call, but I still feel like I need to figure out what I'm going to do like right now. So
Yeah.
I think this is really, really interesting, but I'm like, for me to meet with these people and get their requirements would probably take me 4 months just to figure out what they want, much less me implementing. So can you help me kind of divide like what's my step 1 versus my step 2?
Yeah, let's jump into your immediate needs so that you can get some breathing room with your CFO, and I understand that's what we're going to talk about. I just want you and the people that are on this call to understand that when you think about governance, risk, and compliance and controls, whether you're using a product or not using a product, these are pervasive systems that really address all aspects of your business. And the more boxes you can check across your different silos, the more value you will get. So as you start this journey of road mapping, keep in mind that while you may not get all the boxes checked for every problem in the business, which is not our goal today here, we want you to be aware that it does impact everybody else, depending on what system you select or not select. So keep those requirements in mind. And Scott, let's move on to a real meat of this discussion.
And to lend some gravity to your statement, I mean, I've personally worked with over 100 EBS customers and duplicate payments and credit card data protection. And I mean, I've worked on every single one of these issues at a department level. Everybody has to deal with this stuff. And I mean, Oracle was built in 1992. It's a batch system. It doesn't do these things naturally. So I do think if we do this analysis, the ROI of implementing appropriate controls down at the transaction level will absolutely pay for itself, but it'll take me time to put together a business case to show management what that would look like.
I mean, the good news is we do this for a lot of our customers that are in the same boat. So as we talk about the roadmap, I'll share some examples and templates with you that our customers are using in their selection process to help them accelerate that, and hopefully we can get this done for you in the next 6 weeks. So let's take a look at the next step, and then we'll come back to this slide as we close, just to give you a little more of a business justification to make a case for moving forward after you present the 6-week roadmap. So I've kind of been talking about it on the previous slide. The first thing you look at is requirements. So you've already laid that out for me, that you implemented Oracle, and the first thing you're looking at is just getting back in compliance for 2021. So I mean, what is from your perspective? Tell me, like, just unpack that statement about your CFO. What is she looking to get done in terms of compliance? Just a checkbox, or is she looking to, where do you guys sit? I mean, I know you got a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of projects planned, so it's not like you have free time to just dedicate to SafePaaS. So what do you want to get done in the next 6 weeks, and what do you want to get done next year?
What would I want? So I don't mean to suggest that she's short-sighted or she's, like a bean counter. I think that she has specific requirements. She has a budget. She has requirement for audit for next year. So having some comfort that you're okay there, then it's like, okay, now let's dream about what we'd want it to be. So in terms of getting the engineers, the operations, the business folks involved about how we would want to propagate these rules or do a better job of managing those environments, maybe drive revenue as well. I think that once we can check the box, what I would want to see is a plan that's set. I would want the people at the operations level to understand that if they put a platform in place that could actually accomplish those things, and give them probably till the end of the year to dream what transformations they would want to make in the business. We're trying to grow revenue. We're trying to set up a distribution center. We're trying to do drop ship. We're trying to do what are the types of things that we need to happen. And a lot of times a system implementation plan says you sign a contract with a big customer and you make a commitment to do something new and you realize there's zero controls in place. So to have that be part of the decision so that running the system well, it's just as important as getting it done, becomes one of the criteria for making those types of business decisions. As the CFO, that's really what she's going to want.
Okay, well, so, as I said in the slide, we want you to be able to gather those requirements, right? So there's that short term that you got to get done now. And then there is the mid or long term of, really uplifting the business and finding those bottlenecks. So it's more than just a one-time exercise. I think it helps you, like any other process you run, as a continuous improvement process, right? So you're going to gather that information. Now, what we can help you do here is look at the controls you already have in Oracle GRC, and take a look at maybe some of those controls need to be a little bit changed. You mentioned you haven't done a lot of updates to GRC since 2012. So you mentioned you've upgraded your Oracle systems, you've added Workday. So all those are the areas where you may have a need to improve controls. Now remember, controls are not about controlling the system alone, although that's a big part of it. The controls are really on the process to mitigate the operational and financial risk.
Right.
So now that you have put in Workday as an example, you have processes that flow from your payment systems to your payroll systems, expenses, and so forth. Then they go back and forth. So your processes have changed. So you're going to have to look at it from a all these systems, and there's some things might even be happening in spreadsheets as your workforce has moved remotely. They may not have a system, or they may have gone to a new whiz-bang application like Slack or something that is making it easier for them to work remotely. So those systems might have become in scope. And so what you want to do is that for a minimum solution that's complete and accurate, you need to take a look at those requirements that have changed since you first implemented GRC, where your business was all tucked away in one ERP system, the Oracle ERP system, right? So those are some of the things that I would say you consider. As I said on the previous slide, you also want to talk to the business control owners and gather their information, because that has changed as well.
So getting the rules out of GRC, got it. I got them. I don't necessarily know if I can interpret them all, but maybe you can help with that. The external controls, do I go to the auditors, to my internal auditors? Where do I go to get a catalog or a listing or an understanding of the external controls that are more manual?
So yeah, you're absolutely right on the GRC controls. We can take a look at them and do a lift and shift to a new system. As part of that lift and shift, we can validate and modernize those segregation of duty controls, for example, that you have in your access controls governor, because some of the entitlements have changed. There are more ways to create a supplier and pay a supplier than there was back in 2012, right?
Yeah.
So things have changed, and if the rules are not updated, it's basically what we call in the audit world incomplete control, which is an ineffective control. In other words, you're not protecting your business. And that's a big risk that I don't want to alarm anybody here, but that's when the auditors say, look, if we can rely on these controls in the system, for example, segregation of duty, we have to go to what's called substantive testing, which means we would have to rebuild that financial statement from scratch. And the cost of doing that is sometimes 10 times higher than relying on the control.
Yeah, that's right.
Customers want to avoid that, right? You want to avoid that, right?
Yeah.
So to be able to avoid that, I would say that you can lift and shift. Now, the question you asked that's really interesting is about external auditors, right? So when Sarbanes-Oxley was passed into law, one of the big things that happened that Congress put in place through PCAOB was that the audit firms can no longer consult with the company management to provide control. So they have to remain completely independent. If they're the ones that are telling you how to design a control and then they test it, that's essentially, has been totally outlawed. And you saw a big breakdown between audit firms, and that's the history. But yeah, so you unfortunately can't rely on your external auditors to provide you the controls. They certainly can review it, and we'll talk about that in the next few steps. However, we gotta get you to the next level, right? So these are some of the things that I would say is we can lift and shift what you have today, and then start thinking about internal audit and external audit who are independent from you. So we have that catalog I mentioned earlier. You can start using that as a starting point. We can sit down with you and go through that. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so now this comes down to scope. So defining your scope and the constraints within that scope, that's typically what we do with any enterprise system, right? You guys are familiar with implementing a lot of ERP systems. So tell me a little bit about this integration. How do you integrate today between your HR hierarchies that are now in moved to Workday from the old days when I worked with you back when you have it all in Oracle? How does that work today?
Well, so, I mean, the business runs on EBS. If you look at HCM, I mean, we basically do HR and payroll within Workday. You're bringing across your payment information to do cost center roll-up, so you can do financial reporting. But the system of record for the HR, the personnel record, is all going to be in Workday. For a couple of the kind of oddball countries where it's harder to do payroll calculations, we use a third party called Safeguard Global, which works fine. They just pass those dollars across. So it's not a super sophisticated interface, but it is a business process that sits between the two systems. For that particular one, it's basically, it is a one-to-many, many-to-one. So it's a straight reference integrity. It's a good system design. Within Magento, honestly, since 2012, we're doing a lot more online. It's kind of the new thing. Revenues are into double digits in terms of the amount of revenue that we're actually pushing through e-commerce. And so we have some pre-processing. So there's some business logic that actually sits between Magento and EBS. I mean, EBS from an order fulfillment system is still a batch interface. So you have a new customer creation, you've got to do demand reservation, you've got pricing. So there's some things that we do some double checks. So there's part of I guess the point I'm making from a controls perspective is it's not like it's the lipstick on Oracle that does all the work. It's doing part of the work too. And so some of the logic actually sits in the interface between. And I mean, right now we do those controls manual because there's not an automated process to do that. And I don't know if that's too big of a hairball to try to automate that. I mean, what have you seen with other e-commerce sites that aren't integrated into the platform?
I mean, it is a red flag from an audit perspective, because now, we look at, what is the financial information flowing eventually to general ledger that the company is using to report and disclose financial statements. So now that you move to these new and more modern cloud-based systems, the good news is you're servicing your customer better and you're taking care of your employees better and your business is growing. But you also have to make sure that now that those systems are in place, that there's good controls so we can rely on the financial statements. Because, for example, this is definitely not a reflect on your company, but we've had customers where interfaces have failed and people have gone in, and I'm not saying that's happening in your company, but they've gone in and manually entered something to the interface table. You freeze those journal sources, I'm sure, where the data flows in from Magento into Oracle, right? But if one day that interface fails and things happen, and somebody unfreezes that journal source for the interface and puts in a transaction, that's a big no-no, because guess what? When that interface is open, anybody with access to that interface can put information in, and your entire financial statement can become unreliable, right? So those are the areas I would want to look at more in the scoping process. And I would suggest, as you build out this plan to present to your CFO, that make sure she understands that these changes in technology are impacting the scope of work that you got to get done. So don't want to be the bearer of bad news here, but I just want to make sure you're covered so you can get that box checked. That's your goal.
Yep.
Okay, let's continue. I know we want to, you only had an hour today with me, or 30 minutes. I'm going to take you more time, but I appreciate you joining me. So building a catalog of additional improvement and potential, that's the third step that we recommend. So we talked about that on the very first slide, right? That our focus today for you is to get you up and running with a compliance solution that works for you. But what about other things that are going in the organization? You sort of touched on that earlier, and I said we'll come back to it. So tell me a little bit more about your order to cash process. What else is happening in the organization where controls can help you?
Well, I mean, there's the operational stuff, which I think we've covered pretty well. I mean, I get that. I think the stuff that is harder is the stuff that comes from the outside that we have to deal with. There's a mandate from California. There's GDPR stuff that everybody's very familiar with. And the penalties are so great. And honestly, maybe the executive visibility is so high that, hey, how you doing, boss? Oh, what are you doing on GDPR? So I'm kind of like, part of it's having a good answer. part of it is wanting to make sure it's the right answer and that it's not some herky-jerky thing that's got to be done manually. So, I mean, to me, layering in the things that we have to do for SOX and things we want to do for the business and the things that are being layered in as a result of these external requirements, which frankly change constantly. So
Yeah.
I don't think we see anything different than most people on this call, with the exception that, we're starting to plan for some FDA stuff. We don't really have HIPAA today, but GDPR, we do work overseas, and it's super important, and it's very punitive.
Yeah, and I think so. I think you're bringing up a point that many of our customers, folks on this call, are impacted by. That compliance regulation, box is growing and growing and growing. It's getting larger. It was about financial statement risk. Now as your business has grown and gone global, you have to deal with not only the regulation in the U.S. but also, what's happening when you sell to customers in Europe, which is where I think GDPR is coming into it, or California, where you have CCPA. So,
what if I sell to a customer that's in Chicago who sells to a customer that's in that's in Europe or in Asia, and I'm trying to service it? Even if I don't know it, I still have to be prepared for it.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So, I mean, as you think about the controls for your roadmap, think clearly your core is that SOX box right now, right? You're trying to get that checked. But it would be really important for your executives to understand that that's just the beginning, right? As you start this planning and execution next year, you've got to be able to check these boxes for many more types of controls on your data privacy, data protection, data exchange, and all of those things we'll talk about as we complete this exercise. So the fourth step in our methodology is build out your system for a minimal viable plan, based on the first two steps that we just went through. And so, we talked a lot about short term, but you've got to start thinking about those items that are long term. So, we talked about different regulations. We talked about your new way you're servicing the customer, the new way your employees are working. So what are some of the things that that you think you can take from this discussion and take to your, can include in your plan? Those are the things I'd like you to think about, right? Based on the best practices we have shared on this call and other controls that we have shared in the past.
Well, I tell you what I'd like to tell her. I'd like to say, okay, boss, here's the plan. We're going to take what you've currently got. We're going to dust it off. We're going to put a little love and care and some extra humans and some spreadsheets around it. We're going to take the current controls that you've got, and we're going to implement them for next year. We're going to do it. We're going to do it now. We're going to get it done. At the same time, we're going to try to go through and do an exhaustive study across all the stakeholders of all those other things that you think you're going to want it to do. So then when we try to look at that, you're calling it the long-term plan, the future solution, at least we're not going to make that decision in a vacuum. And you're going to be the sponsor of that project, and we're going to build a team to define what that solution looks like. But the one thing I don't want to do is to put a plan in place for 2021 that gets thrown away when we start that plan. This should really be clear that it's the first step of the 5-year plan, not the step that's going to get us through 2021. That's what I'd like to tell her.
So you're going to come up with thousands of requirements, I'm sure. If you ask people, you're an IT guy, they'll give you plenty of things on their plate they would love for you to take over and do. Yep. So I would like to just share a tip with you and the people that are listening on this call, and that is take a risk-based approach, Scott. Don't try to boil the ocean, because I know how busy you guys are and your budgets are tight and you can't do it all, right? So when it comes to risk management, I recommend that our customers take what we call a risk-based approach. What that means is take a look at when you get this big list of thousands of requirements, which you will, you start thinking about 3 to 5 years. Your CFO is going to roll her eyes if she sees 1,000 things on your spreadsheet that you want to get done, right? And so what we recommend, take that list and break it down based on what's the likelihood of that risk actually happening in your organization. If it's rare, for example, you have $100 in your petty cash, you're not going to spend $1,000 protecting that $100. So that's an example of something that's likelihood and impact are low. Okay, we accept that risk, and when we're part of you getting in the car and driving to work is a risk we take every day, and we accept that risk. So on the other hand, there are risks that you can't accept. Your customers leaving, or the data getting disclosed, the things that we have talked about, financial statement risk. And so that's where we can help you apply a risk-based approach to come up with a solid plan with milestones that you can get it through your board and your approval process. So take a look at that option and let us know how that works for you.
So if you were to put an executive sponsor over the building of that prioritization, where in the organ would that be a COO? Who would be over that?
So, some organization, I know you don't have a dedicated risk management department. So we're starting to see the chief risk officer sort of come in and play a key role in that.
Yeah.
And so I think in lieu of that, what I'm seeing in most organizations, it's really a committee of executives, right? It includes folks from your operations, like the chief operation officer, folks from IT, like your CIO and yourselves, folks from finance. So that committee then becomes the risk management committee for the organization, and generally it's a half a dozen people, an organization your size, and we help them go through a facilitated workshop. And there's some material on our website about enterprise risk management. It's a pretty formal process. There's a whole framework around it that COSO came up with back in the 1970s that eventually became the COSO ERM framework that's adopted by most US companies. Outside of US, there's also ISO standards like ISO 31000. And we take a qualitative and a quantitative approach to that. In other words, we have these discussions with the executives and have them basically threshold the risks from their experience of managing your business. And from there, we also apply the quantitative analysis based on the number of transactions and the risk events that have occurred in the organization, as you have seen us do in your ERP system. And that gives them the data science they need to be able to make the decision around these risks. And then you come down to risks that are high in likelihood, high in impact, which must be prevented from happening because your business depends on them. There may be risks that are high in likelihood but low in priority, probability, and et cetera. And those we may suggest you monitor those risks. Some you monitor continuously because they're high enough. Others you monitor once a month. The frequency of the control can be varied, right? So that's the type of a roadmap that the customers are asking us to provide so that the executives can make a risk-based decision around controls.
Yep. Interesting.
So I know we're coming to an end. I've thrown a lot of jargon, risk jargon at you. I'm sure we're going to slice and dice that in the final thoughts. So now that you've got all this plan worked up, you can put that into an approach document. We call it the SAFE method here at SafePaaS, which basically enables you to put the milestones and track the progress and report it up to your chain of command. And allocate, of course, resources required to get this done, internal and external. We're certainly here to help you roll up the sleeves and do what's needed. But really, it starts from that internal gathering of information. Impact on software and support, that's another aspect that you want to consider. We've talked about GRC support itself. I know that Oracle's and most customers are considering more cloud-based application, moving in their data centers around to get efficiencies. Certainly resource challenges. So all of those things will then become your step 5 in the 6-step process. And this is the deliverable ultimately that you can present to your management to get that short term done for 21.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, so once you're done with that, let's start talking about long term. And my customers that come to us today, as much as they're so focused like yourself in getting through the next audit, they're starting to ask tougher questions like you are, next 3 to 5 years questions, right? That are you the right partner for us to really pick for this very important journey? Even though we're only buying, maybe a lift and shift strategy to move the controls from GRC to SafePaaS, but ultimately they're asking the kind of questions you're throwing at me, which is, how do I protect my business risk in my order to cash process, in my procure to pay process, knowing that it's a dynamic business, it's growing, it's changing, your product lines are moving, your supply chain is moving. So as you think about building that long-term roadmap, one of the things that I would recommend to you and the folks that are interested in building this up for next year is make sure that those proof points are independently verified, right? Because you don't want to get stuck with a partner that can get you through the next lift and shift, but as soon as the new requirement shows up, which none of us know around the corner, the next COVID, the next surprise, whatever that is, you're stuck, because now you've invested a lot of time and money, and now you got to start from scratch and go back and build a new 6-step plan, right? So that's what I would leave you with, Scott, that, when you think about the long-term plan, validate that the capabilities in the organization you're working with can address your stretching goals around your business ambitions. So I think we've covered all the plans. Let's summarize that, Scott. Here's what I would recommend you do. Ask me questions. Tell me what's on your mind, what's keeping you from getting started, and what your CFO, most importantly, might be looking for that I haven't covered yet.
I mean, I hate to be tactical. For us, it's resourcing. We need to go get resources internally to do a good job. I think what I'm sensing is, if you said, check the box and pretend like you don't know anything, I'm like, I'm going to go get my rules. I'm probably going to load it in your tool, and I'm just going to run it like and be done in 2 weeks. Or I'm just going to keep running GRC and have humans just run around and make sure that that stuff is going to work okay. And I could technically, in reasonably good conscience, say, you know what, I think I'm kind of good for 2020. I feel like I could do that. I think to do a good job, to do my job, I need to really understand the scope of the applications and the risks that are outside of anything that Oracle GRC could ever have envisioned. I need to understand my requirements external to the company as well. So I feel like doing my homework is really what, if I want to be a good steward of company resources, I need to allocate some time to do the research to really understand what the bigger picture is. And I know the SafePaaS is a product company, and there's probably some things that you could really help with there. But I think that for me, I'm kind of like, wow. So you asked me how you could help. I'm thinking of what I need to go do. So I think that I would give you a gold star in terms of this meeting. And part of it is I'm never going to know everything that you know, but at least I feel like you've helped me understand what I need to go do.
Absolutely. So, Scott, thanks for your time. I just want to leave you with a couple of other thoughts that might help you get this journey on the road and get it done in a way that protects your company ultimately, right, and your management. So, it's a common concern that customers have that, I've got to be able to kind of get through my current pain point, right, which is to just pass the controls you've been passing since 2012 using these tools. And you're absolutely right. You could move those control lift and shift into SafePaaS. We could add a little more value, a little more, but there are changes. So for example, one of the things I want to leave you with is, you're in your old system, there's only a couple of people that know about these controls, but everybody in your business that enters a timesheet, is really responsible for that control of entering the timesheet on time, making sure their expenses are correct, and they're logging the time right. So we're all, in fact, control owners, right? So when you think about this journey, think about all the easy technology that's available today versus what was available a decade ago. That can really make everybody in your organization take responsibility for the controls they operate today, including their timesheets, right? Which is everybody. So with the SAML capability that SafePaaS offers, a single sign-on to every employee's ability to look at their own risks and protect their company. Most people want to do the right thing. In fact, of the $3 trillion of fraud that's caught every year, and that's just the fraud that's caught, 80% plus is reported by employees. Even though you have a few people in your audit department that are constantly looking at your current GRC tools and reports and passing them on, checking the boxes, to really make this journey successful, think about, educating and rolling this out and making it more sustainable. I understand everybody has a lot on their plate, but this is one thing that differentiates a successful company from a failed company. failed companies, Enron is the example everybody talks about, is where only 3 people in the audit department knew the financial statements were fudged with off-balance sheet transactions. Whereas in well-run companies, every employee is part of the solution, part of GRC. And of course, I'm a GRC guy, so I'm going to always say that. But think about every employee in the customer that really cares about your company and is happy to be there and helping their customers and doing the right things. They want to do the right thing. So if you make this control visible to them, they will do the better job and your job becomes easier and you guys can go achieve your goals better.
Thank you. So I wouldn't have called you a controls freak. I would have called you a GRC geek. But
I'll take either one as a compliment.
As far as I'm concerned, I can't go 2 gold stars because I'm not there yet, but definitely a gold star, and I really appreciate your time. This has been super helpful.
Thank you, Scott. We're here to help you. Emma?
Yes, I just want to say a huge thank you to both Adil and Scott for taking us on this GRC roadmap journey today. Thank you to everybody for attending. I'm sure that you will have found the session, really useful and really valuable to help you moving forwards. If you would like to talk to Adil and Scott, on an individual basis, then please feel free to reach out to me. You have my contact details there on the screen. And hopefully we'll see you at our next event, which is the end of our Oracle GRC series, how you can expand your GRC controls to the enterprise. So thanks, Scott, thanks, Adil, and thanks to everyone for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you.